Today's episode is brought to you by Bay Area company Millennium Edge Apparel, an athletic apparel company that manufactures clothing for basketball, golf, soccer, regular workouts, and even restaurant staff members. To learn more, visit millenniumedgeapparel.com. And now, back to the show. At some point, we all come to a point in life where we have to ask some introspective questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? Today's guest, I have an author coming on. He's an author of an incredible book. His book is titled The Caravan of Remembering, and it's a roadmap for your life's mission. In today's episode, we're going to discuss what is the best way to tap into your talents and desires to create a life of meaning and authenticity. How can spiritual principles be used as a student athlete to create an environment of success, growth, and fulfillment for a team? How can the student athlete live in a way that is fulfilling while serving their community? Without further ado, I have Daniel Goodenough coming on to the Sports Mastery podcast today. I wanted to ask you, you have an incredible book. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, it's about being able to articulate the why, what, and who. Why am I here? What does that call me to do? Who does that call me to be? Who would I have to be to step into it as a first level? And then there's always the question of how do I do that? And the manner in which I do that, which is another conversation. And for years, for many decades actually, I've been traveling around the US and Canada and Mexico and occasionally England to teach these classes in person. And I wanted there to be a way that people could work the process, because it is a process. It's a process for staying in the conversation, and like a practice, an athlete or a performing artist might have scales they need to do, or rehearsals, practices, and an athlete has practices that they do on a consistent basis to become an elite anything or to build mastery. And so the idea is that it's not just for the lucky few to know why you're here. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be by some accident you discover why you're here. It's a skill development thing like anything else in life. And if you're willing to do the practices and you're willing to show up consistently to them, I promise that you'll be able to articulate to anyone, anywhere, under any circumstance, why you're here, what that's calling you to do now, given where you are in your life and the culture you're in, who you're being called by that to be, and who you would have to be to step into it and make it happen. And you'll be able to know when it changes. Not that the life mission changes, the vehicles may change for the expression of it, and you might have more than one vehicle. And to be able to skillfully articulate and move that forward. So the book itself was to say, this process I've been doing live with people, is there a way to do that at home by yourself or without taking the class? And the book is the integration of the weekend process into a story, so that you have an example of somebody working the process. And so the scales or the practices are at the back of the book. It tells you what page in the story they're on, so you can get a context for it, and you can work the practice using the book to get clear about your why, what, and who. And there's also a community online called the Caravan Conversations.community, where you can work with other people through the process. We have people doing that through Zoom. Someone in Morocco and somebody in London and somebody in Vancouver, Canada, going on Zoom together to work the process together. So I'm happy that it does seem to be working, that whether you're doing it all by yourself in your bedroom or whether you're connecting with other people to do it, it's a way that you can get clear about your why, what, and who.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, because I often express to my athletes and the sports parents that I work with that you have to do the work. This is part of the process. And sometimes when we look inside or we choose to be introspective or look at ourselves, it's not always easy. But once we begin to do that, we begin to see some form of enlightenment, or things begin to change for us in a positive direction. And we start to get the things that we want. What is our life mission, and why is it important to discover what it is?
Well, Richard Bowles defined it in a way that I like, and he's saying there's three main aspects to that. One being remembering the one that sent you, two being making the world a better place, and three being doing the thing you most love to do in the way you most love to do it, with the people you'd most love to do it with, in the place you'd most love to do it, in the way that the world most needs it done. So it is your fundamental why. When you get in touch with it, it becomes the context within which you do all the things you do. So when I'm talking about your life mission, and I do say mission versus purpose, because sometimes purposes get to be a little bit like fashion. You know, it's like purpose can be whatever. I think it was Alan Watts said, sometimes your purpose is to get to the other side of the room. So that doesn't necessarily help instruct you about your life. So sometimes the purpose is to get my homework done. Sometimes the purpose is to finish my job so I can enjoy my weekend, and all that's great. It's just not a life intention unless it is. So your life purpose isn't really a life intention unless you say, that's the reason I'm looking at this. So mission then also implies being sent. And I think teams have missions, and whether that's sports teams or life teams or communities have missions. So the idea is that it's not just the job. I think we have, sometimes when we're young, we get a job. And then if we stay with it, it becomes a career. And then ultimately, if you keep up leveling that career becomes a vocation. Vocation meaning calling. So if the career aspect of your life mission might be the calling, but you also have a family life mission and a community life mission and possibly a spiritual life mission. You might have a marriage or partnership mission. That your life mission covers all the areas of your life, so that they're not siloed. Like, I have this thing over here, and I have this thing over here, and this thing over here. And when I'm in those different places, I'm a different person. You could say that if you're clear about your why, what, and who, the why gets translated to the vehicle of the moment, and the what tells you the context in which you're doing that so you can do it skillfully, and the who you're called to be is always a great conversation, whether it's about the sports team you're playing on, or whether it's about the community work that's needing to be done, or it's about your community at school or university, or it's about your family and your relationships. It touches also, that's why I call it a life, emphasis on the word life mission. It's not just a career, or it's not just being a star on your team.
Yeah, I like it, man, because, like you were discussing purpose, and it sounds like, we can have purpose for different things. It could be different circumstances, different situations in our life, whether we're on a team, whether we're in the classroom doing a project, like you said before, the family life. And then, what's our life mission, be it doing something for the community, doing something, for the church or whatever that may be. So I can definitely see the difference where, the mission, it kind of looks like it's over everything to a degree.
Well, it can be. And, when I said purpose can be like fashion, I've found that when I talk to people and they say their purpose is, in addition to it sometimes being a temporary thing like a project, or just to get my homework done so I'm free to enjoy my weekend, or finish the work for my job so I can enjoy the weekend, there's also this kind of fashionable aspect where in 2017, many people will say their purpose is, because that's what everyone is saying right now, their purpose is. It's the cause du jour. And then 2018, it might be different, in 2019 again. And then sometimes it goes by decades. In the 90s, everyone's favorite purpose was this. And in the aughts, everyone's favorite purpose is this. And now we're in the teens. And, so sometimes purpose is a little bit fashionable. And I think life mission needs to be personal.
I agree. I like that. I wanted to ask you, man, what is the best way to tap into your talents and desires to create a life of meaning and authenticity?
Well, I think one of the conversations, and again, it's a practice. There's a saying that I ask better questions or up-level your skill around craft, and there is a craft, whether it's the craft of your sport or the craft of your work, if it's a job-like thing, and if you're a pro athlete, that is your work. But whether it's the craft of your work, when you up-level your craft, you change the process of your craft. When you up-level your process, it changes your whole life. So the process of the question of why am I here on the planet and what does that call me to do? That's the outer life. So there's an outer life mission and an inner life mission. And the why is, let's say, the foundation for both of those. And the what does that call me to do? So sometimes people say I'm a human being, not a human doing. And I'd say you're both. The what, the outer life mission, is what's that calling you to do? So if you're a young athlete in high school, then how does that, what's the what that is your reason for being here that you need to pursue and learn to express skillfully, which then, coming back to your question about desire, means that where's your desire coming from? Is it the desire of your personality? Is it the desire of the group you hang out with? Is it the desire of wanting to be appreciated or validated? Meaning maybe there's some life circumstance that has you searching for a compensatory desire. And, without getting all into therapy about that, just to be in the inquiry of past being appreciated and validated. If I wanted to be appreciated and validated for why I'm here, what would I be doing? And how would I be doing that? And who would I be showing up as? And how do I develop myself through my work in high school, in the team in high school, or in the university and the team in university? And then if I enter the pros, who would I have to be along the way to keep showing up to build the skill to actually get there? So why it's important is that it helps you have that context, and it helps you develop in the way that says, I'm not just this person, I'm not just the context of this slot as an athlete. There is, whether or not I become a pro and do my sport for many, many years, or whether it's something I'm moving through on my way to something else, in both cases, both would be the one true game you came to play. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie The Legend of Bagger Vance, where it happens to be about golf.
Right.
But, so whether the one true game you came to play may be a sport, and it may be the sport is in service to teaching you for the thing you do after that. And either way, it's meant to help you become a who, and that's the inner life mission. The what then is in service to the who you're becoming, which is really the why you're even doing the what. Because if you're doing a what that isn't helping you become the who you came to be, then you miss an opportunity. Because really the who you came to be is the only thing you're going to take with you when you leave this place.
Right.
However you think about that, who you are inside is the only thing you'll take with you. Everything gets left behind. So hopefully you make the world a better place for having been here, and then you become the who you meant to be. So I think I don't know if that answered your question. You might.
It did. And what I would say to my sports mastery audience is that, one, I appreciate having you on, and you're giving my audience and even myself, we have to think about the things that we think about. And sometimes, I've encountered sports parents that they might be pushing their own desires onto the student athlete, which can make that finding that authenticity and that meaning quite difficult. So this is something for us all to think about.
Well, there's a piece in the Book of Wisdom, and I'll just put it that way. It's in the Book of Wisdom. It's a saying that has been reported as saying, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart from it. And that's not actually an accurate translation. A better translation, because the word train comes from midwifery in a particular context in which that was translated from, which meant create an environment for life. It was a midwifery term for taking the caul out of the mouth when the child is born. So how that is more accurately translated is create an environment for life according to your child's gift or bent. And when they are older, they will not depart from it. He or she will not depart from it. So what that means is, rather than the parent have it being assigned the quote unquote duty to decide how their children should go, it's saying the parent's invitation is to create an environment for life according to your child's gift or bent. So then you're invited to be very present to who is this child you have, that you now have stewardship with, to, and what would their environment for life be? And if they try something and it's not the environment for life they thought it would be for them, if you're not invested in, you're supposed to tell them how to do that, then you're going to be open to, well, what else would you like to try? And then the conversation about the life mission piece would be, for instance, part of the practices or scales that you would do. Just an example is your heroes. Why are they your heroes? What is it about your heroes that lights you up or attracts you or motivates you or fascinates you? What is it exactly that has you say, this person is my hero? Or the movies or the books or the cartoons or whatever, that, you know, if you have a favorite movie, why is that your favorite movie? What is that movie speaking to you in you that would give you some idea of who you are and why you're here and what you're called to do? And, you know, it could be, if you could ask yourself, if I could just change one thing in the world, and there might be thousands you'd like to, but if you were restricted to just one, what would be the one thing you'd want to change? Or you could say, you know, in the original TED Talks, originally there was only one TED stage, and you had 18 minutes, and in your 18 minutes, you were pretty much guaranteed that at least 20 million people would view your TED Talk. So then you had 18 minutes to speak to the world, and you would be reaching people in every country in the world. So you could say to yourself, what would you do with your 18 minutes? If you had 18 minutes to address the world, how would you use your 18 minutes? You could say, what fascinates me, what motivates me in a big box bookstore that has every category. Which category do you always go to first and why? And what's the second and why? And I could go on. You know, what wakes you up in life?
Right.
Some people get afraid and some people wake up around certain things. So what is it that wakes you up? So I could say that I could go on, but those are examples of this kind of skills and the questions that you could ask yourself on a consistent basis that would help you be in touch with, why did I pick this sport? What is that in service to? What is that training in me? What, if for the greater context of life, is that in service to? And what's the who am I that's being trained? And what's the who am I I'm shooting for? And, you know, in the talent code, I think it was Daniel Coyle who wrote the talent code.
Yes, I read that.
So, you know, his point was, there's the famous 10,000 hour thing, right? That
yes,
10,000 hours of deep practice. His point, though, was, along with that you won't show up to the 3 hours of intentional deep practice every day unless you have an ignition around it. You know, I'm doing this because my parents want me to, or I'm doing this because I want to be cool, or I'm doing this for reasons that aren't connected to your why, means you probably won't have the ignition that's required for you to show up in the way that you're building that mastery over time. So the why of the life mission is you have that ignition, you know why you're doing it.
The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the parent to work through together. The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the coach to work through together. It was created in a sense and in a way to bridge the gap in communication between these parties and build a successful relationship dynamic. To learn more, visit sportsmastery.com/workbook or check out the show notes page and click on the link. And now back to the show. Yeah, I agree. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, especially if you're a student athlete, sports parent, and coaches, I would encourage you to listen to this twice because there's a lot of jewels and gems in this episode. I also want you to head over to Sports Mastery on iTunes. Go to iTunes, visit Sports Mastery. This is a 5-star rating. rate this 5 stars and give us a review. This helps with our iTunes rankings. Getting back to the show, Daniel, I wanted to ask you, how can spiritual principles be used as a student athlete to create an environment of success, growth, and fulfillment for a team?
One of the things I say so often about that would touch on the sacredness or spirituality of something is to say that sometimes the manner in which you do something is as important as whether you do something. So if you're joining the team because you're supposed to, or you're not, it's not connected in a certain way, then the manner in which you do that might have you showing up but not really showing up. You know, the body's moving but there's no one home.
Yes.
You know, so I could say that, you know, there's this thing called the integration of the good, the true, and the beautiful, or art, science, and spirit. And we could say the science of sport or anything else in life. The thing that science says is, here's how it works. You know, when we talk about technique and mastery of the technique, in this case, if we're talking sports, there's a technique, and that's the science of the sport. And you could say that the beauty is, you know, a pass elegantly done, or, you know, that the manner in which you show up to your sport is, whether it's swinging a bat or swinging a golf club or throwing a pass or catching a pass or whatever it is, maybe running down the ice to catch the puck or whatever it is, that you might, there is, in science they might say the most accurate equation is said to be the most beautiful. So, and one of the things we appreciate about mastery in an elite athlete is they make it look, it's beautifully done. You know, that catch in the outfield was a beautiful catch. So, you know, that's the art and science, I guess, the art and technique of it. And then is, if you have a sense of connection to, you know, I think it was Ken Wilber talked about the way he defines spirituality is that it's the questions of ultimate concern. So if you said on the level of, what would it be to make this, to have this relationship to my sport that says, that speaks to, that there is something sacred, and there is something that in my pursuit of this sport that speaks to the questions of ultimate concern. So to make your sport sacred, to have it being meaningful in the sense of it addresses the questions of ultimate concern. And I was one of the things I appreciated about Phil Jackson when I lived in Chicago and he was coaching the Bulls, and I knew some of the people who worked with the team, and and then watching him work with the Lakers, and to some degree, Steve Kerr was a student of his, as well as a player.
Right.
That there was this idea that in the coaching, there was a conversation about that which transpires behind that which appears. So you could talk about it in a sense of there's the surface level of the game and what seems to be happening. And often Phil would point out there's something that happened in the stands that changed the atmosphere in the Coliseum or the arena, that had the feel change enough that the players changed enough that the momentum of the games switched. And you could say that's psychology, and I suppose it is. It's just to say that to have this idea that there's something that moves in the game beyond what is apparent, it starts to address the questions of ultimate concern. And there was a book called In the Zone. There was a diet book that was called In the Zone, but there's another book called In the Zone where I think it was Wilt Chamberlain talked about at the level of the NBA playoffs, he would have his most amazing games when he dropped into the level of spirit and that which was transpiring behind that which appears, and said that he would show up to a place much like Wayne Gretzky was famous for going to where the puck was going to be, that he said he would see the lines of energy moving on the court, and the ball always followed. Like the lines of energy would move to a player first, and then the ball would follow that. And therefore he was able to go there and steal the ball or whatever. Like there is this whole collection of stories that isn't often shared in the news, but is shared at the elite level of sports, that there is something beyond the surface level of sports. And, there was a movie called For the Love of the Game when, the guy who was, Kevin Costner was the pitcher in the story. And, the movie was whatever, it wasn't the world's best movie, but there was this moment in the movie where he shared his process on the mound in the other team's arena, so to speak, where one moment he hears all of the negative things being said to him to throw him off his game, and he would say, "Clear the mechanism," and everything would be still and quiet. And he could see people's mouths moving, but he wouldn't hear them anymore. So there is this aspect of saying, how can you be in relationship to your game? And I was coaching a guy who was on a minor league level, and just having that conversation about having the ability to say, clear the mechanism, made a huge difference for him in his game and in the minor leagues. So is that an aspect of the sacredness of the game, or the integration of the good, true, and beautiful? So as you have a sort of awareness of all these aspects of the game, they all come together, both in a way that has you care deeply about the technique and the practicalities of the game, and whether you're doing it artfully, and also that there is this deeper level to the game that has you have a deeper relationship to both the game and the fans as community, which then carries over into the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, man, because you were talking about Phil Jackson and the Bulls, those years they were winning championships. Mm-hmm. I forget the gentleman that they were working with, but his name, I know his first name is George, but he was like their spiritual teacher. He was doing the meditation for the team. And I know that really helped them. His just last name, I just can't think of it right now. But though, and I've read his book, it's just been a couple of years. I'd have to find that. But it is on parallel with what you're discussing, so I can definitely appreciate that. As we get into the fourth quarter, Daniel, I want to ask you, how can the student athlete live in a way that is fulfilling while serving their community? What would you say to him or her or the sports parent?
Well, it does come back to, again, having a practice in addition to the sports practice that is an actual practice that has you bringing your attention consistently to the question of, why am I here? What does that call me to do? And who does that call me to become? Like doing those kinds of skills, like when am I most confident? When am I most alive? What needs doing in the world? What would I do for the love of the game in addition to my sport? My favorite movies, my favorite people, why are they my heroes? What's my deepest engagement? Asking these questions every day. If I could spend a day in any place in history, where would it be and why? If I could spend a day with any person from anywhere in history, who would that be and why? And there are hundreds of questions like that you could ask. You don't have to ask them every day, but if you just asked, if you had, I think you might remember in the talent code, he was referencing going to a research facility, and they were looking at a film of 1 hour of practice. And there was this 6 minutes, Clarissa was practicing. Yes. And he said, this is 6 minutes, this 6 minutes is giving her a month's worth of benefit. And then there was the other 54 minutes of that hour. And he said, this 54 minutes, she's just playing. She's getting nothing from this. My point is, it could be as little as 5 or 10 minutes of actively, consciously, intentionally engaged in the question of, who am I? How was I designed? What's my life mission DNA, if you will? Asking these questions, being in the inquiry of, why am I here? And even just ask those 3 questions. Why am I here? What does that call me to do now? What are the vehicles for the expression of the what and why? And who would I need to be to step into that? And who will I become by stepping into it? And asking these questions, if you are doing that, whatever age you are, that will help you move out into your life in a way that gives you the context for who's showing up to these classes I'm taking, and why is that important? And why am I picking the subjects I'm picking if you have a choice about that? Most curriculums, both secondary and graduate level classes or university level classes, you have some electives. Why am I picking the electives I'm picking? And if you have a choice of school, why am I picking that school? And your activity in the community. So the question about being in service to your community, if you're clear, and you can be clear by doing the practices, it's a skill development thing like anything else in life. If you're clear about your why, what, and who, then you'll be clear about, in whatever elective time I have outside of my sport, what in my community am I called to be involved with? Because I'm clear my why would have me do that what. And I'm clear my why would have me show up as a who because I care about this, or I see that it needs to be done. And I can't not do it because I'm clear why I'm here. And that gives me a flag that shows up that says, do this. I don't know. Did that answer the question?
It did. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, today we've been discussing how to tap into your talents and desires, how you can use spiritual principles as a student athlete to create an environment of success, growth, and fulfillment for your team. And finally, we're closing out with how can the student athlete live in a way that is fulfilling while serving their community? Daniel, I really appreciate our conversation. There is a lot that you've delivered in this short time. And it kind of reminds me, like when you were talking about Clarissa in the Talent Code, I don't know if she was playing the piano. I forget which instrument.
I think it was a clarinet, actually.
Maybe it was the clarinet.
There was a particular jazz version of the song she was trying to achieve.
Yes. And what was it like? Maybe one or two notes that she kept working on over and over until she got it, if I remember. But
the 4 elements was to know what you're shooting, have a global picture of what you're shooting for, which doing the life mission inquiry would help you with. You know what you're shooting for, even if that's what I'm called to do on this team, and what's the mission of my team, and what are we all shooting for, and what am I shooting for as an individual, as part of this team. So then when you're doing the practice, there's a way you want the skill to develop, so that's what you're shooting for. Then you chunk it down and slow it down. So that's when she played a couple of notes.
Yes.
And because she had this global picture of what she's shooting for, after doing, she chunked it down, slowed it down, so that she was able, after playing a couple notes, to go back in and compare it to the global picture she was shooting for. And then the 4th piece of that is knowing when you're on and knowing when you're off. So if you know what you're shooting for and you've slowed it down enough to be able to compare what you just did to what you're shooting for, and you do that often enough, you're now very conscious of when it's not that. Whether it's in your 6 minutes of deep practice or hour of deep practice, or whether it's in the game. In the game, because you've had that as a practice of knowing when you're off, in the game, you'll know when you're off. And that doesn't become something you beat yourself up over. It becomes, skill development. I want to work on that the next time I get a chance.
Yes. Is there anything that you may have forgotten, Daniel, that you'd like to let my audience know? Before we close out, where can my audience find you and learn more about you? And how can they find your book also?
So you could find out about me on a website called thewayoftheheart.com. That's the organization I do the in-person classes through and help people up-level their life. The book is available. You could go to the Caravan of Remembering website to order the book. You could also go to Amazon. It's available on iTunes and Kobo and Kindle. It's also available in, I think it's called the Cafe thing, in various, sometimes bookstores and libraries where you can print on demand the book. So you could go to Facebook, you could go to YouTube, there are some things there. And like I said, if you wanted to work the process with someone, caravanconversations.community would be a place you could go. You could start a group to work with the book. So iTunes, all the e-formats, really literally all of them, and Amazon, and you could go to the Caravan of Remembering book site or thewayoftheheart.com.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Peace and blessings.